are both able to enter and exit Nate Kane's body. And that leads us into the final year of the John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake run. Uh, Certainly the darkest chapter, I would say, in Jim Corrigan's time as the Spectre. It's a time in which the balance which Corrigan and the Spectre have been working towards this whole series started to unravel again. And it's a period when Corrigan and the Spectre find themselves so much at odds with each other, they are literally able to separate from each other without any external forces allowing this. It's also Jim Corrigan's last run as the host of the Spectre. Perfect bookending to the start of the series, in which Jim is once more feeling tired, more tired than he ever has. And it just leads to a beautiful resolution in the end. But certainly, a lot of the stuff we see in this final year of the Ostrander-Mandrake run is just really powerful stuff that just hits you over the head, so to speak. Now, not all of it is doom and gloom, and there's one particular issue from the final year of the run that I want to talk about. It's issue number 54. And before I get talking about issue number 54, I just want to comment again on the importance of the letters pages in the Spectre run by Ostrander and Mandrake. Pete Tomasi did such a great job of going through different letters, printing some really thought-provoking letters that were written in by fans, and he did a great job of responding to. And on at least one occasion, Ostrander himself responded directly to a fan in the letters page. And one of the things which came up a lot in the letters pages was DC's treatment of the JSA, and a number of fans were asking why Extent's treatment of the JSA, why DC editorial's treatment of the JSA wasn't in some way addressed by the Spectre, given that he was one of the few Golden Age characters who survived the forced exile of the JSA during Zero Hour. And Pete Tomasi, for his part, openly supported the fans who were quite perturbed with how DC execs decided to push the JSA off to the side again. No surprise that Mr. Tomasi would in time become the editor of the JSA title. Pete Tomasi, in addition to being a really solid writer, is also a really great editor. If you pick up any books that were edited by Mr. Tomasi before his decision to switch to the writing department, they're solid reads. He's a man who clearly knows his comics history and has a clear love for comics legacy. And it seems to me that Mr. Ostrander-Mandrake also read different letters from the fans with regards to the JSA. And so issue number 54 does a beautiful job of addressing JSA legacy, and it also does a really neat job of finishing a story that was started in the Bronze Age and was never properly resolved before the end of the pre-crisis era. So it's issue number 54 from 1997, and in the opening we see a young man named Michael Holt standing at the top of a bridge holding a picture of himself and his wife. And from the art, we get a sense that something terrible has happened to Mrs. Holt. And we also get the sense that Michael is planning on doing something pretty terrible in his grief. He is accosted by three street youths who tell him to hand over all of his money or else they're going to kill him. To which Holt replies, well, I'm at this bridge because I lost my wife in a car accident. She was pregnant at the time. And so I'm not really interested in living, guys. So you know what? If you shoot me, you're actually doing me a favor. And before the youths can call Holt's bluff, the Spectre appears and scares them away. And then he morphs into Jim Corrigan and asks Michael, what are you doing? You know that suicide is considered a form of murder, and I can't stand for it. To which Michael, after getting over the initial shock of seeing the Spectre and seeing him transform into a human, says, well, look, I have nothing else to live for. My wife was my everything. We were looking forward to starting our family. And Holt refers to his many achievements in science, technology, sports, and medicine. And Michael says, but none of that matters. You know, now, given what's happened, I don't see any purpose in life. And so Corrigan muses on this, and he transforms back into Spectre, and he starts to tell Michael a story of a friend or an acquaintance who he had many decades ago. And Spectre starts telling Holt about Terry Sloan, the original Mr. Terrific. And the Spectre draws a connection between Holt's experience and Sloan's experience. Terry Sloan was a brilliant, multi-talented man who lost interest in life and was considering ending it all when he realized that he could actually use his keen intellect and his other skills to fight crime and help his fellow citizens at the street level. Mr. Terrific was one of those heroes who had no superpowers. He wore a fanciful costume, but he fought and defended people with his mind and with his fists. And Spectre then starts to tell Michael about a time in which he, or the Spectre, had become distant from his friends and colleagues in the JSA. And the Spectre recalls one annual meeting of the JLA and JSA in which Mr. Terrific was looking quite down and in the end was murdered by the shadow thief who used the body of Jay Garrick. And I knew I got the name wrong. I'm sorry, folks. I meant to say the Spirit King. He was the one who used Jay Garrick's body to murder Mr. Terrific. And of course, this is a callback to that famous JLA JSA team up story, which ended on a really odd note because the Spirit King, still using Jay's body, managed to make a quick exit via one of the JLA satellites transporters, and while Superman offered the JLA's assistance, Dr. Fate, along with his other crestfallen colleagues, said, no, thank you, this is a Justice Society matter, and then left. And this story never got resolved. In the end, there was no justice for Mr. Terrific. And my only guess is that it's one of those unfortunate byproducts of the DC implosion. But this was a story which was waiting for years to be resolved. And so here, really neat to see how Mr. Ostrander and Mandrake took it upon themselves to resolve the story. So the Spectre continues, and he explains that his involvement in this tragic incident came a couple of days later. In the flashback scene, Jim Corrigan goes into the precinct and he sees his colleagues looking out the window, a couple of them saying, "Wow, look at that." Corrigan looks outside the window and says, "Oh boy." And it's Jay Garrick running around like a madman, calling out the Spectre. Really mirrors Jay Garrick's calling out of the Spectre years later in Zero Hour. And it certainly just helps to establish the concept that Jay Garrick has had reason to be angry or resentful of the Spectre on multiple occasions for not being there to help people, especially other members of the Justice Society. So the Spectre recalls that Jim Corrigan makes a quick exit, morphs into the Spectre, and goes to Jay Garrick, and Garrick catches the Spectre up to speed, and together they go off to find the Spirit King. Well, when they go into the underworld, they find that the other members of the JSA, including Power Girl, which is quite interesting given how Power Girl's timeline had been changed post-crisis, they've all been captured by the Spirit King. And in fact, the whole murder of Mr. Terrific was just the first step in luring the Spectre into hell so that Lord Tritan could capture the Spectre. And of course, Spirit King was thinking that he was going to get a power upgrade for his service to Lord Tritan. But the Spectre recalls that it's Terry Sloan who was the one who helped bring down Tritan and the Spirit King, and that while Terry's zombified body was being used to attack and taunt the JSA, Terry's spirit broke free and rallied the whole team and aided the Spectre in taking down these two enemies. And so at the end of this flashback, it's really nice to see Terry saying, "You know, Jay, for years I didn't think that I was as important or as big of a difference maker as the rest of you guys with all your powers on the JSA, but in the end, I see the value which I had." And so a nice resolution to the story for Terry Sloan. And so the whole upshot of the Spectre telling this story to Michael Holt is he's working on getting Michael back from the brink. Clearly the Spectre sees something in Michael, and so he's trying to trigger that special spark in the young Mr. Holt. And I've got to say, a brilliant job of concluding a previously unresolved story from yesteryear in DC Comics history. Really great. I can't think of a better ending that could have been written at the time that this JLA JSA story was first written. So the Spectre leaves Michael to consider his story about Terry Sloan, and the scene shifts to the three street youths who go back to their bosses, quote unquote, and these three hoodlums are actually about to get a pretty severe beating because they were unsuccessful in mugging Holt. But at that point, we see Michael again, and this time he's wearing a quickly cobbled together costume, which consists of a black leather jacket, jeans, running shoes, gloves, really interesting looking sunglasses. kind of